was sleeping at my parents' house because I didn't want to stay in my apartment, mostly because it was boring there. I lived alone and didn't have a TV, so all I really could do was sleep. If I came back to my hometown, at least I could see my family and spend time with them. It allowed me to keep my social skills up. I decided that I would stay downstairs with my little brother and play video games. We'd just bought a new Wii, and we were pretty addicted to it. My dad and my sister went to bed early, while my brother and I kept gaming. At around 12:45, we were still playing, when I heard something that sounded like my mom calling my brother's name. It was like she was shouting for his attention from another level of the house. She did this a lot, yelling at him to do the dishes or to go to sleep. He's pretty young, so he does still have a bedtime. But this didn't make any sense. First off, Mom wouldn't yell so late at night. Second, and most importantly, Mom wasn't home. She'd left to catch a flight a few hours before. I shrugged it off as my mind playing tricks on me. I often hear strange things that don't make sense. I was probably just tired. Not even 10 minutes later, it happened again. She called him in the exact same voice and tone, faint, but definitely my mom, yelling my brother's name. I was about to conclude I'd gone crazy when my brother looked at me confused and said, "Is that Mom calling me?" I stared at him in disbelief. He heard it too. Impossible. I told him that I'd also heard it a few minutes earlier, and he explained that he had heard it too, but he just thought it was a sound in the video game we were playing. We agreed that it must have been, since we couldn't find any other explanation. We were still creeped out though, so we resolved to play the game on mute. After a while, I got a weird feeling. I felt like something wanted my attention. I wondered if maybe my mom missed the flight and drove back and got locked outside. I told my little brother to stay put and that I was going to check things out. I walked to the front door and turned on the porch light, but no one was there. Strangely, the door wasn't even locked. I locked it and walked back to the basement door. I noticed that the door was open just a bit and stared into the dark for a second. I decided to check it after looking upstairs first. If something was inside, it would be wiser to check on my sleeping family rather than a dark, empty floor. I went up the stairs slowly and checked all of the rooms that were open. I didn't find anything thankfully out of the ordinary, so I went back downstairs. When I got to the living room, I found the basement door was now closed. I was sure I had seen it open before, and it freaked me out, so I called my little brother over. He walked up to me, and I asked him if he had shut the door while I was upstairs, but he told me he hadn't moved from the TV room since I'd left. I didn't want to check anymore. I just shut the basement door tightly. There was a lock on it, but the door would never shut tight enough for me to make the lock work. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a huge knife and went around the house, making sure all the doors were locked. I texted my mom to ask her if she was okay and if she was in the house by any chance. She, as I expected, didn't answer. She was supposed to be in another country. After a while, we kept playing the game on mute, waiting to hear the voice again. But it was quiet after that. Finally, I got tired and left my brother alone downstairs, going up to my room to sleep. The next morning, I woke up and found myself alone in the house. Everyone was gone, so I just started watching YouTube videos on the computer all day. I kept glancing at the basement though, just waiting for something to pop out. But it was still quiet, and nothing came out. When my dad finally came back from work, I told him what had happened. I even asked him if maybe he'd been watching a home video with my mom in it. His room was above the TV room, so we definitely could have heard it through the ceiling. But he told me he had been asleep. He had gone to bed very early and drifted off right away before he could turn the TV on. I kind of knew that already, but I wanted to be sure it couldn't have been anything, except for, well, whatever it was that had made the noise the night before. There was one thing he told me that I didn't understand. When I left my brother downstairs, I saw him shut off the game system and TV, then shut the room's door from the outside and retreat into the living room to sit in the armchair and watch videos on his iPad. He usually stayed up until about 5 a.m. Once the sun came up, he'd go to bed. But until then, he'd be in the living room on that chair and wouldn't move until it was to go get a snack in the kitchen. It was a shock to me when my dad said that when he woke up and tried to get into the TV room, it was blocked. My little brother had gone around to the other side through the bathroom. He found that the bookshelf had been pushed in front of the door for some reason. A reason I have never been able to explain.
There's some kind of basement in my hotel room. I'm on the 15th floor. By Mr. Outlaw. My work requires that I often go on business trips. I like the job. I like meeting new people. I like visiting new cities. But for this story, that's neither here nor there. I'd just arrived in Chicago and settled down in a place that you could probably call high class. I'd personally never shell out the exorbitant funds required for these sorts of things, but if the company was paying, then I wouldn't complain. One night, I came back drunk as hell after a night out with clients. At some point during the AM hours, I went into the bathroom and slipped on some water, falling into the wall space between the toilet and the shower. I stuck out my arm, but it actually went straight through. I wasn't sure why such a fancy place used such fragile materials for their rooms, but this oddity really didn't seem right. The fall wasn't that hard. I couldn't understand how it broke so easily. I stepped back, staring at the gaping, newly formed hole. Now, I wasn't exactly sure how hotels were designed in relation to how much space there is between rooms, but I was under the assumption that they were built side by side. If that was the case, then there must have been a hole in my neighbor's closet or something, which was rather concerning. It was late as hell, so I decided to wait until the morning to tell them about it, so they didn't freak out and think there was some weird jerk making holes in their walls. The morning came, and I knocked on their door. They opened up and were mostly understanding about what happened. They took me around each of their rooms, but there was no hole anywhere. All right, I thought to myself. Don't have to worry about anything there. But I still had to tell the front desk or something. I really wasn't prepared to pay for the damages, though. Stop being so cheap with your building, you know. However, I decided to put it off until after my work was done. I came back the following night and took a look at the hole again. It was really big. Out of curiosity, I took my phone flashlight and shined it through. If this didn't lead to a room, then what was it? Just a random space in between? The first thing that I saw was an old-looking notebook lying around. Interesting. I reached in and picked it up, wiping a layer of dust off of it. It wasn't really distinctive looking, just a plain red notebook you probably could buy anywhere. But it was the contents inside that were disconcerting. It was just pages and pages of messily scribbled nonsense. At least, that's what I thought it was at first. There was definitely a pattern, though, in the haphazard symbols and pages. Another language, maybe? I didn't know. Occasionally, there were also diagrams. These were easier to understand, but still rather cryptic. They looked like detailed outlines of a building. After a few seconds of looking through it, though, I came to the definitive conclusion that it was the hotel. What caught my eye was the 15th floor, which was labeled more clearly than the others. There was what looked like a staircase descending down from one side of the rooms, cutting through the floor below. It didn't really show or describe where it was supposed to lead. The only word at the end of the staircase was Zone CKX9. Now, I'm not sure how many nope situations you've been in, but this probably fit the bill. Despite that, I kept looking through the hole, just in case there was anything else. And there certainly was. With dead candles scattered all around it, there appeared to be a trap door. My blood kind of froze there. Was I supposed to deduce that it led to a staircase on the 15th floor? Eventually, I kind of just forced myself to laugh at it. I mean, there was no way, right? I made a decision right then and there. I started tearing down the wall some more, just so that I had enough space to crawl through into the hidden room. It really wasn't bigger than a walk-in closet. Unfurnished wooden floors, walls, and ceilings, with that weird trapdoor in the middle. I took a moment of hesitation before opening it. I mean, if there was actually a staircase, there was no chance in hell I was going down there. I reached down and grabbed the metal handle. I searched around for a lock, but it wasn't there. I finally lifted it up, not really knowing what to expect. There was only blackness at first, and then I shined my light down. Stairs. Inexplicably, there were stairs. It shocked me so much that I instinctively closed it. I sat there for a moment, astounded. I started believing that it was just some weird illusion. With that in my mind, I opened it up again and carefully stuck my hand down. Not a solid surface. There was only blackness at first, and then I shined my light down. Stairs. Inexplicably, there were stairs. It shocked me so much that I instinctively closed it. I sat there for a moment, astounded. I started believing that it was just some weird illusion. With that in mind, I opened it up again and carefully stuck my head down. Not a solid surface. There really were stairs. I spent the next few hours trying to figure out what could have been underneath my room. I asked around, did the research, and even went down a floor to see for myself, but everything yielded the same conclusion. It was just supposed to be another room. I knocked on the door of the person that I'd mapped out to be right below me, but nobody answered. I even did some research online. No similar experiences to mine. In this situation, I did the one thing that I thought was appropriate. I went to my coworker, Jacob's room, and told him about it. At first, he was a bit bothered that I was knocking on his door at 1 a.m, but I knew he'd be interested in this. He was one of those brash, paranormal aficionado guys. A bit annoying at times, yes, but I'd have to say we were friendly enough, though. After I explained the situation to him, he let out a skeptical and somewhat obnoxious laugh. He still elected to come check it out, though. During the walk up, I was slightly concerned that it wasn't going to be one of those situations where it disappears or some crap. But when I got up to my bathroom, it was still there, still weird as ever. When I opened it up and revealed the stairs, I could see a look of sheer shock drawn across his face. I doubt he'd ever actually experienced anything paranormal before, despite the stories he always told. There was uncharted territory for both of us. We mused for a few more hours, deliberating on whether or not to go down. Well, it was actually just Jacob trying to convince me to go down with him. "Come on," I remember him telling me. "What a screwy story." For whatever reason, he was adamant about going through with this insane nonsense. Eventually, I agreed to go down like 10 steps and then right back up to safety, just to see what was going on. We opened our flashlights, and he went first. As soon as my body descended into whatever hell this place was, I could feel the atmosphere shift around me. Hard to explain, but it wasn't like when your ears pop at high altitudes. It was something else. I went down the 10 steps that I'd promised before stopping and analyzing my surroundings. It wasn't like I could see much, though. It was just dark, incomprehensible darkness. I watched as Jacob went further and further down. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" I said to him. "None of this makes any sense." He went down probably around 8 steps further than me before turning. "Dude, this is crazy. You coming?" "Screw that," I told him. "What kind of place is this?" Just as I said that, his expression dropped. "What?" I asked him. "Do you hear that?" he responded. I strained my ears, trying to figure out what he was referring to. It was faint, but it was there. Water? I couldn't really tell if it sounded more like somebody was sloshing around ankle deep, or if they were flat out swimming. But it was extremely far down, causing me to wonder how deep this place really was. And then Jacob did the stupidest thing anybody could have done in that scenario. He yelled out, "Who's there?" And in the near utter silence of this apparently massive room, it echoed like hell. It was quiet after that. Quiet. No more movement. Whatever was down there had reacted. What happened next nearly gave me a heart attack. Heavy, wet footsteps began sprinting up the stairs. They were still faint at first, but they gained at an inhuman pace. Jacob and I followed suit, scrambling back up. We stumbled back into the room, closing the door behind us. As soon as we did this, the footsteps ceased again. But we didn't have peace of mind yet. There was no lock, and the door wasn't so heavy. Jacob quickly lugged the coffee table through the washroom, back to the hidden room, and then placed it upside down, over the trap door. After that, we just stood there, breathless. We glanced at each other, both of our minds probably on the same page. There were still 3 days on this trip. I didn't really get much sleep that night, even with the drawer barricading the bathroom door. I kind of wish that I'd grabbed the book back there, though. Maybe I could have analyzed it further, uncovering any possible answers. But for obvious reasons, I don't think going back down there is the best idea right now.
My basement.
I remember seeing the house for the first time. I was a child of 7. My young parents had just bought their first home. I remember how much I used to hate living in the cramped, dingy apartment we previously inhabited, and opened the doors to our new home with wide-eyed wonder. It blew my young mind how spacious this house was. I went upstairs to scope out my new bedroom. I was so excited that I was getting my own room and did not have to share one with my infant brother. On my grand tour of my new digs, I finally made it down to our basement. The basement was nothing like the rest of the house. The upstairs was elegant and classy. The basement was cold, metallic, sterile and stinky. The ceiling was lined with ancient pipes winding in grotesque angles. The floor was covered in rough cement. I recall taking a look at the stairs for the first time and being immediately struck with how odd they were. The stairs were surrounded by drywall, which clashed with the rest of the basement. One particular section of the wall was colored differently than the rest. It stood out like a sore thumb. I inched close to it and felt the texture of it. It felt very strange. I then knocked on it. A hollow sound pervaded the empty air of that basement. Something about that sound immediately put me ill at ease. I walked up the stairs as I could hear that same hollow sound echo in the emptiness of the basement. As we settled into our new home, I began to get comfortable with my surroundings. The house began to feel familiar, everywhere that is, except for the basement. It just always put me off, and I avoided going down there as best I could. Our family couldn't be happier. My loving father and mother doted over me and my little brother. My life was perfect. Then it began. I would hear strange, errant noises. When I pointed it out to my parents, they told me the old standby, that the house was settling in. One night in particular indicated that something wasn't right. I snuck downstairs to the kitchen for a late-night snack. As I closed the refrigerator, I heard a tapping sound cut through the silence of the night. I craned my head to see if I could pinpoint where the sound was coming from. Dread began to wash over me as I realized that tapping was coming from the basement. I inched my way over to the basement door. I opened it to see the blackness of the depths below. My ears perked up. There it was again, that hollow tapping sound. The same sound I had heard on my initial visit to the basement from hitting the drywall. I turned on the lights, steeling myself to go down the stairs and investigate. The tapping continued as I took the first step. Fear overtook me. I ran back to my bedroom and hid under my covers until the morning light gave way to a new day. I remember walking down the stairs. Being the first one up and about, I ran to the living room to play Nintendo. On my way, I passed the door to the basement. It was shut. Though I was in a state of near panic when I ran from it the previous night, I distinctly remember leaving the door open and not turning off the lights. I rationalized that my mother or father must have gone down there for some reason and lost myself in Super Mario Bros. 3. Later, I mentioned the incident to my parents, and they just assured me that what I'd heard was the sound of the hot water heater clicking in the night. I knew better, but welcomed a logical explanation. About a month after the move, my mother asked me to run downstairs and grab a load of socks out of the dryer that were in the basement. I reluctantly told her I would. It was the middle of the day and enough time had passed to dull the fear I had felt the week prior. I turned on the lights. I ran down the stairs. Hearing the hollow sound echo with my footsteps, a cold sweat started to form on me. The smell hit my nose as I reached the last step. My parents had mentioned that a mouse must have died and assured me they would find it. I made my way to the dryer and grabbed a basket. I pulled the socks out hastily and shoved them into the basket. After I shut the door to the dryer, I surveyed my surroundings. The stillness of the basement was so eerie. Then I heard it, a faintly audible whisper. At first I thought it was somebody calling from upstairs, their voice scarcely making it down to the basement. However, this was not the case. That sound was coming from the basement, specifically from under the stairs. As I stood frozen with fear, it began to increase in volume, but still remained barely above the threshold of human perception. What was being said incomprehensible to my young ears. Then it stopped as quickly as it began. I moved towards the stairs, keeping my eye on the oddly colored portion of the drywall. As I took my first step to escape this ever-growing nightmare, the most profoundly terrifying moment of my life occurred. A loud, hollow banging shook the stairs, almost knocking me to the ground. I ran up the stairs as fast as my legs would carry me. Through tears and shaking uncontrollably, I told my parents what had happened. They tried their best to calm me, but nothing they said could ease my mind. I told them in no certain terms I would never go down to the basement again. They must have been convinced of how terrified I was because they honored my request and never sent me down there again. After another 3 months in the house, things returned to normalcy for me, and honestly, there was about a 2-week period where I was happy again. This would be the last time happiness would exist in my life or my family's. One moment in particular comes to mind. I remember lifting up little Jonathan above my head as his pacifier fell out of his mouth and brushed against my nose. I pulled him in for a big bear hug and remember how he smelled. That wonderful smell that only babies emit. I was so content. It all came crashing down for me and my parents the night of July 2nd, 1991. That is the day Jonathan went missing. A ransom note was scrawled in barely legible English and left in his bed demanding $20,000 in cash. It informed my parents that if they contacted the police, they would kill little Jonathan. My mother and father took to their room and argued loudly and emotionally over whether or not to call the police, as I listened with tears streaming down my face. My mother eventually wore my father down, and the police were called. Seeing as the location of the drop and time were indicated on the note, the police set up a wiretap just in case the kidnapper decided to call. I remember asking my parents and the police if they had thoroughly searched through the house in case he was still there. They assured me they had, and that Jonathan would be fine after the drop. But the seed of an idea was already growing in my mind. It would blossom throughout the rest of my life. My parents followed the instructions to a T. They dropped off the money and then waited in the location that they were supposed to pick up Jonathan. He never came. Needless to say, this tore my family apart. As the weeks passed and there was no news about Jonathan, my young, vibrant parents became husks of their former selves. My mother especially. She blamed herself for getting the police involved and believed that to be the reason Jonathan was not returned.
One night, as she was sobbing alone in shambles, clutching a bottle of wine, I finally decided to divulge to her the theory that had been brewing inside my skull. I told her that I thought it was whoever, or whatever for that matter, was under the stairs that had gotten Jonathan, and maybe he was still alive. She slapped me across my face so hard that I saw stars. She screamed at me, the guilt expressing itself as rage. She told me to stop the childish crap and just accept that Jonathan was taken out of the house by some sick person and was dead. My childhood died that day. I remember contemplating taking a hammer and exposing whatever was under the stairs myself, but the fear of childhood was just too overwhelming for me to actually do it, let alone step one stair down into that basement again. My family moved shortly after the incident. I remember looking to the future with what might resemble optimism, only to have it come crashing down yet again. My parents divorced. The grief was too much to share, and not a year after that my mother killed herself. The guilt must have just overwhelmed her. My father did his best to raise me, but Jonathan's long shadow always hung over our lives. 20 years later, I began to think long and hard about my little brother's disappearance and how angry it made me. My family had a chance at a normal and fulfilling life, and it was snuffed out in an instant by whoever took him. I wasn't just robbed of a little brother, I was robbed of a chance of happiness. As I grew up, I accepted the official story of what happened. But lately, curiosity began to get the better of me. I began to drive past the old house. Seeing that it was currently vacant, ideas began to swirl in my head. I broke into the house one night bolstered by alcohol. I decided to do it, knowing I would likely find nothing under the basement stairs, but hoping that this would close a too long chapter in my life and allow me to finally move on. To my dismay, the stairs sounded exactly the same as I remember they did. A hollow sound pervading the emptiness of the basement. I stared at the spot in the drywall, still discolored, still just as ominous as it was when I was a child. However, the fear was not going to stop me this time. In fact, I was feeling the opposite. I was feeling a courage I hadn't felt in a long time. The moment of truth was upon me. With all the force within me emboldened by years of pent-up rage, I ran towards the wall shoulder first. The drywall came crashing down around me. I opened my eyes as my bravery was immediately eroded and turned into absolute horror. My God! Bones. Bones everywhere. My horror increased to unimaginable heights as I surveyed the tight space, seeing the myriad of skeletons strewn about. The light played menacingly off their tiny white frames. Tattered pieces of paper were strewn about with God only knows what written on them. There must have been the remains of 20 or 30 children. My fright reached a crescendo when I realized that with no exceptions, they were all missing their skulls. One particular tiny skeleton begged for my attention. I became weak in the knees and fell backwards when I saw what were unmistakably bite marks up and down the tiny forearm. As I hit the ground, I expected to hear a dull thud as I landed on the concrete. Instead, I heard a hollow sound. I looked to see what I had landed on. A trap door. Finding new courage, summoning strength I didn't know I had, I opened it. Below me lay a dark tunnel, a crawl space that could barely fit a person lying on their stomach.
The dank smell wafting upward made me reluctant, but I knew what I had to do. Before I was conscious of what my muscles were doing, I found myself crawling through the darkness toward whatever lay on the other side. As I reached the end of the tunnel, I looked up to see a sliver of light cutting through the darkness. With trepidation, I pushed onwards. Cautiously, I poked my head up. To my surprise, the tunnel led to the other side of the stairs. I crawled out to find myself in the corner of the basement, facing the stairs behind a dryer covered in years of dust. The implications of all of this sent my mind reeling, but before I could form a coherent thought, the lights turned off in the basement. My heart caught in my throat as I began to hear someone descending the stairs. Slow but sure footsteps announcing I was no longer alone. With every thud, my heart skipped a beat. I began to hear that incomprehensible whispering, the familiarity reigning the fear and woe of my lost childhood. Worrying the darkness would not adequately hide me, I sought cover by ducking behind the dryer, not willing to take the risk of catching a glimpse, though every fiber of my being screamed to do so. Panic began to set in. What was I going to do when he, or it, discovered his lair had been revealed? While I was mulling over my options, the screaming began. I say scream as a frame of reference, but there is no way to truly describe the guttural noises I heard. The sounds smashing the silence of the basement was so bone-chilling, so surreal as to defy description. He clearly had discovered his perverse sanctuary had been disturbed. Before I knew it, I was running up the stairs for my life. I made it to my car too scared to turn around. With all muscles working in concert, I opened the door and put the key into the ignition in one swift movement. As my car sprang to life under the street light, a shadow fell on my car. I gunned it, never once looking back, flooring the accelerator to the local police precinct. I breathlessly tried to explain to the attending officer what had occurred and collapsed onto the floor in mid-sentence. Now it is a month later. The next day after my discovery, the police launched an investigation and quickly made the same gruesome discovery as I had. I was thanked profusely by the police and the community for what I had found, telling me that they were going to be able to close the books on multiple missing person cases. However, they were not able to find the perpetrator of these heinous crimes. They began to test the DNA of the bodies. A profound sense of relief overcame me when I received the call informing me that one of the tiny skeletons belonged to my brother Jonathan. I shared the news with my father. The look of relief on his face tugged at my heart. The burden he had carried for so many years was lifted. We hugged as tears filled both our eyes. However, the relief has been short-lived. The thing that keeps me up at night is whoever or whatever did this is still out there. The question that plagues my mind is whether or not this monster is literal or figurative. Either way, I hope I will never find out. Between the ages of 2 and 5, my family lived in a house that a family friend was renting out. It was a nice house. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a big kitchen. The whole package deal was for only $250 a month, and that included the utilities. We were told when we moved in that there were only 2 floors, the ground floor and the upstairs floor where the bedrooms were. I remember when we first moved in, and I was exploring the backyard.
I remember when we first moved in, and as I was exploring the backyard, I had seen a window down at the very bottom of the house. For some reason, it had unnerved me so badly, I immediately burst into tears. Since my parents couldn't get me to explain what had spooked me, they simply took me inside to calm me down. This window was a source of fear and unease for me until we moved out when I was 5. My parents assumed that I would grow out of it, and I did, but not until we moved out. I could never place why it creeped me out so badly, but I avoided that part of the yard like the plague. My most vivid memory of my childhood happened in this house. I had been asleep in bed one night when a strange thump from downstairs woke me up. I've always been a light sleeper, but I fell back to sleep too quickly for the thud to really make any difference. I woke up again to a heavy, awkward breathing in my ear and someone kneeling next to my bed. When I opened my eyes, I saw the pale, thin face of a man peering back at me. I screamed. He booked it, and my parents brushed it off as a nightmare, but let me sleep in their room for the rest of the night. A week later, my 13-year-old sister woke everyone in the house by screaming at the top of her lungs. She claimed that she woke up to a man matching the one I had seen crawling into her bed. She described his breathing exactly as I remembered it, causing me to burst into tears. My parents were not pleased. My sister and I slept in their room. Food disappeared really quickly. Mom always just said that it was having 2 growing children and my dad in the house. Sometimes things would be moved from where we had left them the night before, but that was also brushed off. My sister assumed the house was haunted. My parents assumed she was just being paranoid. For the next couple of years, this continued on. Food disappeared, things were moved, and we occasionally had nightmares about the same strange man. When we tried to convince our parents that we weren't just dreaming, they brushed us off and insisted we were. This obviously caused a lot of tension between my sister and my parents. The night of my sister's 16th birthday came the encounter that brought about the end of our stay there. My sister woke us up again, screaming at the top of her lungs, but it cut out too quickly to be normal. My parents, concerned, went to check on my sister and found a strange man in dirty clothing pinning her down and covering her mouth with his hand. A fight broke out between the man and my dad, but the man was nearly 72 and weak from starvation. It didn't last long, and soon enough the man was subdued and the cops were called. My mom kept my sister and I in the living room while the cops checked the rest of the house for more people and signs of the man breaking in. Instead, they found a door leading into an unfinished basement. When closed, it blended in with the wall enough that unless you knew it was there, you would never see it. We had never even noticed it, and apparently the family friend who owned the house hadn't even known about it. The one little room was full of pictures of my sister and I in the yard, taken from that basement window. The reason I had always been so frightened of that window came to light. The man had been taking photos of my sister and I for years. That first day, I must have seen a flash of some kind, or maybe the man himself. The man was mentally unstable and claimed that he was in love with my sister and that I was their perfect daughter. He also claimed that since my sister was now 16, that she was old enough to give him another child. I'm not certain what happened, but I do think that he was sent to an asylum instead of prison. Out of the many effed up things to happen to me over my life, this one still takes the cake.
My daughter found a journal in our new house. Point-ranged buffalo.
I just purchased a new house. I got it cheap, as the previous owners wanted a fast sell. I'm not sure why, but I did a Google search and can't find anything sinister about the house. Maybe they were in debt and needed the fast cash. The house is incredible. It is an old hall at the edge of town. There is a long gravel driveway that leads to the house, lined with large trees, their gnarled branches beckoning you to venture further towards the warm glow of light streaming from the gray brick building. Sparse patches of ivy dart across from the right to a large growth nestling just below the guttering of the roof, cascading towards the mahogany door, ensnaring the porch window in its grasp, and barely letting a flicker of light that once used to shine so intently break through. It twists its way around and around the two large white pillars either side of the door, making its presence well known. Strange as it sounds, it feels like that isn't the only presence here. I'm not sure if it's just the eerie atmosphere of an old house or just my paranoia, but something feels very strange, almost like we're being watched. It must be due to the garden, a wave of lush garden grass spreading toward the edge of a small woodland. A river runs by the back, but it's fenced off, stopping what I assume is the vivid curiosity of children from attempting to get a closer look and fall in. Wooded areas always give you that feeling of being watched. There's so many places to hide, and a million eyes could be peering at you, or unseen things eluding your notice. Woods give me the creeps. Aside from the creepy feel, I can't wait to raise my family here. It really has been a break for us. As a young family of 3, it's been tough for us. We have baby number 2 on the way, and due to certain pregnancy complications, my wife has had to quit her job. It's okay though, we'll make it work, and with this discount on the bigger house, we have that extra cash for the baby. Everything seemed to be going great, until this morning. My daughter Edith is 9, and she came up to me today with an odd-looking book. She told me the little girl in her room gave it to her. I shrugged it off as a kid's imagination and put the book aside, not thinking much of it until this evening, when my wife spoke to me complaining about Edith's imaginary friend. She had been misbehaving and claiming this little girl was telling her to. That's when I mentioned the book. It's generated more questions than answers, and I'm a little concerned. I'll write up some entries. I've edited the spelling and punctuation, to make it flow better. I heard another scream today, but Daddy says it's just another fox in the garden. They make very scary sounds. Daddy took me out for ice cream today and said that we could go every Friday, but that I wasn't allowed to tell Mummy about the foxes in the garden making those screams, as she's really scared of them and it will make her cry. I don't want to make Mummy cry. There's a strange sound coming from the basement today. It sounds like a lot of bumps, and Daddy says those nasty raccoons must have gotten in again. He stormed downstairs, and after a lot of shouting and banging, the raccoons must have gone, as the sounds have stopped. I told Mummy about the nasty raccoons at dinner, and Daddy got very mad at me. He came to my room and hit me, and told me that I scared Mummy, that if I told her about the animals again, that we'd have to move, and I'd lose my best friend Eloise, and it would all be my fault. I don't want to lose my best friend. Mummy asked me why my eye was bruised, and I told her I tripped over Mr. Snuggle and hit into my bed. Daddy gave me a bar of chocolate, so he must have been happy that I lied to Mummy. He's letting me visit Eloise tomorrow, and I can't wait. I think I had a bad dream last night, but I was awake, and I heard a lady shouting, "Help!" Daddy said it was just a bad dream again, and got me a glass of milk and a cookie. He took ages to get it through, and after the milk, I didn't hear it again. I think Daddy is making a surprise for Mummy for her birthday. He spends so long in his workshop in the basement when she's not here. I hope it's something pretty, as Mummy seems really sad, and I want her to smile again. A police officer visited my school today. It was so exciting. I've never seen a real one before. He told us that a girl called Casey Everett had gone missing, and that we all needed to be careful and not leave our Mummy and Daddy's sight if we went out. I need to tell Daddy. He'll want to know. Daddy said that we have to go on a vacation for Mummy's birthday, and we'll leave in an hour. I don't want to go. I was supposed to see Eloise today, but Daddy said he's worried about that girl going missing and doesn't want me around the neighborhood. I rolled my eyes and he stomped on my shoes, but I didn't cry out. I know Daddy hates it when I cry. I guess we'll have to go. I'm not sure what to make of this, but to me, it really sounds like this girl's father was up to something in the basement. I guess my only option is to go down there and see what I can find. With it being Christmas and the New Year period, I'm not sure when I'll get the chance, but I'll post an update once I've been down there.
I found a girl's diary in the basement by C.S. Douglas.
A few weeks ago, we moved into a new house. The previous owners left a few things behind, especially in the basement. Some plastic beads, a box of crackers, and a fleece throw. I was cleaning it all up, and I found a diary. Here's a photo of it, and here's a photo of one of the entries. Naturally, I started reading it, and I'm worried. I think there might be something weird going on in that basement. Sunday, July 11th. Yesterday we moved in. This house is like twice the size of our old one. I even got my own bedroom. I already put up my poster, the one with the cute baby owl. Brittany has her own room too. I love it here. Mum says it's time for dinner, so bye for now. Monday, July 12th. Mum left early for work, so Brittany and I have been hanging out in the basement. It's not dark and stinky like our old basement. It's finished into a big room, which is really cool. I already made a blanket fort, and it's really fun to write in when Brittany isn't being loud. Anyway, I hear Mum upstairs. Got to go. Oh, never mind. Mum isn't home yet, so I'll continue. Earlier today, we took a walk in the backyard. There's a deep forest back there. It's so pretty. and I think we found deer footprints. Wednesday, July 14th. Sorry that I skipped yesterday. Mom had the day off and took us into town. We went to the park, to the pizza place, and then to the bookstore. We talked to the owner, some really old guy. He knew a lot about the history of our house. The Smiths who you bought the house from had a lot of rabbits. Mom said she was sorry for Mrs. Smith's death. And before the Smiths, the Learys lived there. They had a girl just like you, also 10 years old, with wavy black hair. I'm 11, almost 12. How dare he? I told Mom, but she said not to fight with him because we want to be friendly to the people here. Friday, July 16th. Shh. I'm down in the basement after bedtime. I realize I left you my diary down here by mistake. I was also kind of hungry, so here I am at midnight, eating crackers and writing in my blanket fort. Mom would be so mad if she knew. She'd probably ground me for a week. Wait, I hear footsteps. Better get out of here. Bye. I like crackers too. Saturday, July 17th. I thought I left my diary in the fort, not out here. I don't like it out in the open. Well, whatever. Anyway, today we went to the pizza place again. There was a really cute waiter there. His name is Jim, and he has beautiful green eyes and curly brown hair. But Mum wouldn't let me talk to him. She wouldn't even let me say hi. She says he's too old, but I don't get it. He's 15, almost. I'm 12. That's like 3 years. When Mom got married, she was 23, and he was 29. That's 6 years of difference. 6! Double the difference in age between Jim and me. I can't believe her. But she was so mad, she yelled at me the entire way home. Mom gets mad at me too, but when she does, she hits me. Monday, July 19th. Brittany must have gotten into my diary again. I didn't write that. Brittany, I'm going to kill you. And why would you write that? Mom never hits us. Whatever. I'm going to hide this diary really well this time. You'll never find it. Also, Brittany, your Hello Kitty shirts are really dumb, and Jim thinks I'm cuter than you. Don't be so mean to your sister. Tuesday, July 20th. Mom, stop messing with my diary. I know it's you. You're always yelling at me, telling me to be nicer to Brittany. Oh, guess what? She's a brat. Your mom loves you a lot. She didn't write that. I did. Wednesday, July 21st. What? Who are you? Get out of my house. Get out of the basement. Out of my fort. And stop reading my diary. I only read it because I'm lonely. I will stop if you want. Thursday, July 22nd. What do you want? To protect you if your mom ever... Unreadable scribble. Friday, July 23rd. I will keep you company. A drawing of 2 girls holding hands. Right now, my daughter is in the basement. I hear her talking and giggling to someone.